Alrighty, here we go. My name is Travis Neville. This is the Travis Neville Podcast. I got a chance to talk to TikTok sensation Graybeard Actual. Guy's name's Ray. He's awesome. We had a great phone conversation before we recorded. We talked specifically about vulnerability, and how it's being sold to men as being a thing that they need to be, but it's a scam. It is not going to help you. It's going to make your life worse. It's going to make your relationship worse in every way. If you want more detail on it, in addition to the discussion that Ray and I have, you can check out the chapter in my book, Reviving Masculinity, titled Honesty. It's titled Honest right there. There's a lot more detail about what Ray and I are going to discuss here. But cool guy, great conversation. We're on the same side. We're both out there doing good work, try to help men be better men. Anyway, I hope you enjoy Graybeard. Definitely follow him. He's got a lot of great insight and great information, and he's going places. The guy's going to be ridiculously popular here at some point. So, again, hopes in some way this show helps you to get your shit together. Have a great week. We were talking about maybe going into the vulnerability thing. I'll start, man. I get a lot of people wanting to quote Brene Brown to me. And even like I have a very close friend who's big into self-improvement, and he's very much what I would call a masculine guy. He's a great father and husband and all that. He's also in construction. In every way, how I would define a successful guy. And he came to me talking about this Brene Brown stuff and how much he liked it. And I just warned him off, man. I said, I think that she is like so many other people out there trying to encourage men to act more like women, essentially. And the vulnerability thing is her kind of hallmark, and for lots of these people, it's, he's like, man, I really feel like I need to share these things with my wife and tell her about the things that I'm struggling with and where I'm insecure. And I was like, man, no, that's a really bad idea, bro. What you want to do is call me and talk to me about that and get it worked out. If you want to go back and report to her later in a very non-emotional way, you're welcome to, but you work out those ideas with your buddies. I mean, that's how it works, man. I've watched it 100 times when I don't know. What do you think so far? What are your thoughts as far as I went so far?
Well, I mean, you mentioned the Brene Brown thing. I had honestly never heard of her. And
Okay.
excuse me, I came across a clip just randomly on my For You page of, is it Lewis Howes? Is that his name? Is that
Sounds
right?
familiar. I'm not sure
Lewis
exactly
or
who he is.
something. Yeah. And the whole clip started off with vulnerability is power or some nonsense like that. And I,
Sure. Sure.
what? And then there's this old woman on there, and I don't say that as pejorative, just this older lady on there and
Sure.
saying something, and he's talking. And so I made a clip of it, not even knowing who she was. And then in my comment section said, oh, that's Brene Brown. Okay, I get it. And
Okay.
I have seen her name. It's not that I don't totally know who she is. I go to Barnes and Noble a lot. They know me there.
Sure.
And I've seen her name. I obviously author. More to the point, though, the vulnerability thing. I don't personally know anybody that talks like that. And, we have our own little, for friends, of course, fault men. Because I know a lot of masculine guys that don't necessarily sign on to everything that I believe. And
Hmm.
any guy on the internet, just because he starts talking about this vulnerability stuff, if he's an otherwise good dude, I'm not going to cut him off. It's just that they bought into the entire, maybe not the entire, but they bought in at least partly to the narrative that's being put out there. And let's face it, I was born in 1970. If you're my age, at least, even a little bit older, you've just grown up hearing the basic narrative of all that kind of talk. And so what I take umbrage with and what I've sort of started to make a stand on is not trying to cross swords with this guy or that guy, which that's what got you and I talking to begin with, was you're like, hey, I like
Hmm.
this guy. And, we talked about whatever. I
Right.
don't have a problem with that other guy. It's, he's not thinking it through. Number one, what the dictionary and the thesaurus says
Right.
what it says, and that's a
It's weakness.
weakness.
Yep.
Beyond that is to start to recognize that it's not hyperbole to say that it is Orwellian manipulation of language, and to what extent. Are there a lot of people in a back room somewhere cooking up some evil conspiracy? No, because you can look at the degradation of any society when they're on the decline, which we obviously are.
We very much are.
And this is where we go. It's hedonism, it's decadence, things start to fall apart. And so we're at this point now where men need to be more feminine in order to fit into a softer society. Sorry, that's a little long.
No, man, you go as long as you want to. You're the star here. Yeah, I agree, man. I taught English, but I'm a history guy. I really enjoy history, and when you look at the fall of Rome and what was kind of going on in that society before they basically got taken over by the savages, that's what it was. Sexuality was just whatever, and everybody's worried about their own feelings, and uh, it became a very gynocentric culture in a lot of ways. And I see that happening here in the U.S. It scares the shit out of me, man. Especially when I look at the polarization between the two kind of political parties, the left and the right, however you want to kind of line that up. That also historically, it only gets fixed by one of two things. And one is somebody comes after us. We find a bad guy that's worse than the opposite side, whoever the opposite side is to you. So, be China trying to take us over, say, for example, or a Red Dawn scenario. There's that, or it's civil war. And that's basically the only way that we get reunited as a country. And either one of those absolutely takes us down the wrong road. I mean, we are, as you said, we're on the downside of our society. It scares the shit out of me. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I think that's why you're doing what you're doing. We're the resistance. I'm trying to push back on that. That's why I wrote Reviving Masculinity. It's for all these kids that just were raised with no dads, and I don't know, man. I mean, I know we talked about this on the phone, but I want to make sure we get it out for everybody. What are your motivations?
I think a lot of people.
Go ahead, man. What are your motivations?
Well, just a lot of people. Well, I mean, what I was going to say to the tail end of that was that we start talking about the decline of society and these various things, and people act as if that is some sort of apocalyptic talk or something, and it's not. Mm-hmm. This is just basic human history, and anybody that has spent just a little bit of time in the library or maybe paid attention in history class, every society has an ascension, a peak, and a decline, and this doesn't have to be the end of the world. It doesn't have to be doomsayer. It's not just America. It's America. It's not only America, but it's really Western civilization as we understand it. We are in a decline, period. Yep. What comes afterwards, no idea. But this is the decline, hedonism, narcissism, and I don't mean disorders and stuff, just a narcissistic attitude in the public at large. So hedonism, narcissism, and everything's about chasing pleasure, everything about the pursuit of the short term, and to tell anybody otherwise, it's an offense, right? And so people like you and me, we get out here, we're like standing in the middle of the road going, woo, hold up, hold up, hold up.
Yeah.
And we're the bad guys now. And it's just like, so what got me started, back to your question though, is, I'm not trying to save the world. I don't have any kind of Messiah complex, but at the same time, I couldn't be in the lifeboat and not reach out to somebody. And I feel like I have a lot of knowledge. I've had a pretty good life. I was married for 22 years. My ex-wife's not a horrible person. We got married too soon. There's a lesson there in that alone.
Sure.
I did go through I went through the hookup culture pre-marriage from basically teenage years up until about 24, 25 years old. I'm not condoning that, but I'm also not being morally prude either. I understand it. I get it. And so here I am in my middle ages, and it's like, hey, I have something to share. I know I'm fairly articulate. I've been paying attention the whole way. Yeah, I can do this. I can wave the yield sign, at least, if not a stop sign, and try to help somebody out. And so the original thing that we talked about up front was the vulnerability part.
Right.
There's a lot of men out there that think about this vulnerability issue, and they're not getting hung up on the semantics of what exactly vulnerability means, and maybe they're not misusing it. But as a message, it is a twisting, a manipulation of language to tell men to be more feminine. It is.
Well, let's
everybody on TikTok or whatever.
Go ahead.
Well, vulnerability is weakness. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not the one main argument I've had on the platform. Not even I would. I mean, it's not. Maybe a handful of people have said it, but it's fair
Mhm.
enough. It serves well. A soldier goes onto the battlefield. He's vulnerable. So no, absolutely not. He is not vulnerable. To go into harm's way, to be in a place where you can be harmed, is not a place of weakness. So I was in the Marine Corps. I can relate to this. A
Mhm.
soldier, a Marine, whatever, we go onto the battlefield. We're equipped, we're trained, we're ready. Are we in harm's way? Yes. We're voluntarily in harm's way, ready to go.
Mhm.
All right. But I have my equipment, I have my ammo, I have my firearm, et cetera, et cetera. To be vulnerable to attack, which is a phrase, right? Something has to go wrong. I dropped my weapon, I ran out of
Mhm.
ammo, I'm wounded, right? There's a psychological
You
analogy right
lost your
there.
nerve.
There's all kinds of
Could be
things.
mental. Yeah.
Yeah, all kinds of things can go wrong, but for me to be vulnerable, something went wrong. I lost my
Mhm.
equipment, I got wounded, I lost my nerve, something went wrong. But just
Right.
a soldier on the battlefield in harm's way is not, it's not correct to say he's vulnerable. He's only vulnerable if he dropped something pertaining to his strength. In the dictionary and the source me up on that. I've made
Yeah.
several
Something
posts
took
about
away
that.
from his
Even
strength.
did a
Something
screen
deleted
grab
strength.
record. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that
So
makes sense.
anyway, so it's not even about vulnerability. It's about the changing of language. And there is obviously an attack on masculinity. And I even
That's
get
what it
that.
is.
Maybe I shouldn't even say that. There is an attack on masculinity. And I try to measure my own language so that I am not coming off to people as being hyperbolic or somehow too
Over
blown up. I
exaggerating.
want to get
Yeah.
my message across.
Yep.
And so there's probably a lot of people out there that recognize the war on masculinity, but they don't see it as a war. They truly see it as fixing something. So if I can get on
Yeah.
any platform and say, hey, masculinity itself is good and complete. So there
Mhm.
is people out there, they're trying to change what femininity means. Be more like a man. You're a boss girl. You don't need a man. But you know what they don't say? They don't get out there and say, they don't overtly say feminism itself, or not feminism, femininity
Femininity.
itself is bad. Nobody says that. Nobody says femininity is fixed. Femininity is fine and perfect the way it is. You just need to step up a little bit, girl, make your own money. You don't need no man. So
Mhm.
they want to fine tune it, overtly attack it. Masculinity, they do. They say masculinity in of itself. Well, we all know the DSM came out several years ago and describes it as disorder, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they did the same
And
thing with boys. They called there's a syndrome for boyhood essentially at this point.
yeah, yeah, basically being a roughneck boy is somehow bad.
Yep.
And the Gillette commercial, think of that.
Exactly. Yeah, that drives me nuts. I mean, that's the thing that I mean, if you go on my website, you're going to find I have a where I'm really trying to make the changes in the school districts because I was a teacher for a long time and I've got a PowerPoint presentation on there where I specifically talk about these are the things that how you are underserving the boys in your classrooms. And we know that most teachers are women and they're not trying to be assholes. They're not trying to delete masculinity. They just don't know anything about it. I mean, I don't have any real ability to help raise a girl into a woman. It's just not my wheelhouse. I'm a man. I know about masculinity, not femininity. So it makes sense that that a feminine woman wouldn't have trouble dealing with a boy. Just doesn't really know, doesn't remember what it was to be a boy. She wasn't one. Anyway, so that's where I come out. Is hey man, how can we fix it at the very early levels? I mean, a lot of your stuff is you're approaching guys when they're older, when they're in the dating world. And man, I love that because I listen to some of your stuff. I mean, we're on the same page on that, but yeah, that's it. I kind of hijacked your conversation there. You were talking about that masculinity has become like a some sort of a disease or something to be ashamed of, which is just despicable as far as I'm concerned.
I forget the guy's name now, and I don't want to. I try to be fair. So if I stitch anybody or make a clip, I always try to tag them.
Hmm.
So I should have looked this up beforehand. But there's a guy, you can find it. It's not hard to find. It's not too far back in my TikTok account. But he did a thing where he was comparing masculinity to being he called it a hammer. And he went into this thing and he's talking about how you need all these other tools. and you look at the rest of his content, and all of his commenters, or at least the majority of his commenters, are women patting him on the back. So that's a
Yeah, tell
good
him he's
sign right
great.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so my thing was that just dawned, like, he's basically saying masculinity is not complete in and of itself. So again, I make the, even though the same forces, the same agenda, they are trying to change what femininity means, nobody overtly says femininity is somehow incomplete or needs fixed. Masculinity, of course, does need fixed. So even
Yeah.
quoting this man saying you need all these other tools, and of course all the tools are feminine. And that's nothing against that, runs contrary to the yin yang complementary nature of what we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's all I'm trying to do is say, hold up. So even the dating things that I get into, I'll come out and say it, and I hope it comes off correctly. I've always done really well with women. I don't really have a lot of issues. And
Right.
I'm not that I've not made mistakes. I'm one of these guys. I hear Rollo Tomaso about this. And there's guys that can kind of do this early on, and we don't know why we do it. And so early on, I was good with girls in high school and whatever, but I failed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I just had that in me to kind of keep going, and then I paid attention. You just don't do that
Then
again.
you learn.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just
Then
get
you
up.
learn.
Yeah. And then I got married, and too soon. Again, it wasn't a horrible marriage, but too much to get into. To the point, though, I was single in 1998 and then single again in 2020. And, big difference.
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
So I've been paying attention to different things over the years. And so back to what I started to say, the stuff that I talk about, at least the way I look at it, it's not so much about dating or relationships or anything. You never hear me talk about how to get a girl or how to get laid. I
Yeah,
hate
me
that
neither.
stuff.
That's that pickup artist crap, and I don't dig into it.
Yeah, because it just, I don't know, maybe, some of these guys, I'm not trying to be insensitive or indifferent or whatever. If they've never been good with girls, I mean, that's a big deal. And I sincerely feel bad for these kind of guys. So if they need help getting a girlfriend, man, do what you got to do, bro.
Yeah.
But
Get
on
out
the
there
other
and try.
hand, that's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that I agree with you that yeah, I don't do that either. I just, I think about the last podcast I released was a lot of times I'll have guests like you. Other times it's just me talking about a certain topic, and I listened to one of my recent ones here today while I was working out, and it was advice for basically a married dude. Like, here's how you are better for your wife. Here's how you are better for your kids. Here's how you are better at your job. Here's the ways that you're a leader all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the thing. I mean, picking up girls, I mean, I don't know. And you could probably echo this sentiment too. I mean, I'm single right now as well. And the whole idea of picking up women to me is there is no shine to it anymore. What am I going to call my friends and brag about it? It's hollow. It's going to feel hollow tomorrow morning. There just is no upside. And very frankly, like you said, it isn't that challenging. I feel like, especially when we're older, women actually have a pretty big sex drive when they're in their mid to late 30s, and even in their late 20s, and very different than it was when you and I were teenagers. And yeah, there just is no.
Yes.
I feel no desire to share any of that information. I don't know how I would anyway, and what in the hell would make me an expert on that. But the how to handle yourself as
If
a
I
man is
went
different than that.
to, yeah, if I went to
Go ahead.
my friends, my close friends that are mostly around my age, and said, "Hey, I got laid the other night. I went home with this chick," and I basically describing something from my early 20s,
Right.
they would look at me like, "If you lost your mind, what do you,
Yeah, exactly.
grow up, dude. What are you talking about?"
Yeah,
But
that's not it.
I do want to be fair. If there's a 23 or yeah, but if there's a 23, 33, whatever, if there's a guy out there and he's just never been good with women, until I started, sorry,
Go ahead, man.
until I started reading other people's material and really looking into the whole thing we're talking about, I never really gave it much thought that there's guys out there that spend their whole life, one or two, three women, and I thought, wow, okay. And they don't feel good about that. I understand that can have a detrimental effect on that. So I'm trying to be reasonable to that effect, that if those guys need to learn some social skills or whatever it is, fine, you know. But at the same time, I don't want to promote some idea of just go get laid.
I don't either.
You're definitely going to
Here's the
find the
thing
wrong
though,
woman.
the stuff that you and I talk about, what real masculinity is, there is no way that that won't help you there too. No, I don't say it. It's like my chiropractor buddy doesn't advertise that, hey, I might make you a half inch taller. He doesn't advertise that, but it might come along with what he's doing because he gets your posture right and etc. And I would tell you that although I'm talking about it in the frame of, hey, this is what's going to make you a better man overall, that will also help you. Women are going to be attracted to you, stay attracted to you. I focus on the second half. And man, I love your stuff, your experience watching women at the bar and how they talk about men. And I imagine you watch them interact with different types of men. To me, that's incredibly, it's like a PhD in people and PhD in sexual relations that you got watching these people and being able to sit back and be a fly on the wall and watch the commonalities and some of the consistent mistakes. I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm guessing that colors a lot of what you talk about now. You could see the consistency. The guy who's the beta and doing all the things that feminism is trying to make him do, being vulnerable, sharing his weaknesses, helping him pick out window treatments. I always use as an example, but that just doesn't have legs. That is not going to make a woman attracted to you at a bar. It's not going to keep your wife attracted to you when you're married. That's a pretty universal thing. Your thoughts on that?
It was kind of broad, but my thoughts in general, where I was following you.
Yeah.
What that made me think of, well, what that made me think of overall, though, is the whole issue can get pretty complicated. The water can get pretty muddy.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get in, like getting back to vulnerability, and whether there's an agenda or this is just the natural course of a decline of civilization in general, the point is men and as a whole, we've lost what people call our masculine frame. And so a guy gets into a relationship and he just simply doesn't know how to act because of the course of, let's say, in my lifetime, I was born in 70. Mm-hmm. Over the course of my lifetime, we went from John Wayne, Sean Connery, Burt Reynolds, so on and so on. And now we have Leonardo DiCaprio or whoever. I don't keep up Hollywood, whoever these
Paul
guys
Rudd.
are.
How about
and
Paul Rudd? Sexiest man alive. And he's the most self-deprecating guy in the world. He's the sexiest man alive, my ass.
Camille Paglia made the pretty good example of when movies really in our grandparents' time, is there was not a lot of professional actors to choose from.
They pulled them off.
I forget all the names. Clark Gable.
Yeah.
She gets into some guys
Robert
like Clark
Mitchum.
Gable. They were not.
Yep.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Robert Mitchum. You know the clip probably. Yep. And these guys were just rugged dudes who knew how to be men, and so on and so on. And now we have guys that are trying to be actors from the age of 10 or whatever,
Yeah.
And people can dismiss that as entertainment, but it's like, no, this is what's being presented to us. This is bread and circuses. This is what we're being fed. This is what's filling our belly up. And young men today are growing up with very feminized version, where I grew up at least with Sean Connery and Burt Reynolds, and whatever.
I had Michael Knight,
and then even we were watching.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I had Michael Knight, Duke boys. We had real Rambo, Rocky.
Yeah.
We still had them.
Yeah. And so back to originally what you're saying, though, is it's really not that complicated. Men over the course of the last generation or so, we have inculcated with this idea to be softer, to drop this masculine frame, that masculinity in and of itself is somehow not a whole, right? Yep. So for me to take charge, or for me to, like you started to get on a while back, I need to share my feelings. No, you don't. No, you don't. Stop. Just stop. Because when you start to share your feelings, and I know some women will watch this and think you can't ever share any feelings. No, we can share. No,
that's not what we're saying. Yeah, we're not saying that.
Exactly. If I come home and I say, and the wife says, well, what happened at work? I can tell her about my workday. But
Mhm.
if that turns into, oh, my boss is so mean,
And I'm crying.
oh, I can't get a raise, and I
I don't know
really
what to
start
do
to
here.
put out all my frustration.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
totally
I'm
different.
making myself off as helpless, and
Yep.
she can't help but to look at me and go, "This is even at a biological sense.
Yeah,
This is my
again,
provider and protector."
it's not
And she may have
conscious.
a great job herself, but we're talking
Yep.
about biology here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, women are gonna,
So
they don't even realize it, but that attraction is gonna just flush down the toilet. You do that too many times and they won't even know it. It's not like it's a conscious thing, which makes sense. It's biological. In the last 200 years, technology has ramped up like crazy, but our DNA has not changed. Our chromosomes have not changed. Our what we came from has not changed, and she's still gonna want that same thing, and you're gonna scare her off doing that shit. Yeah, I agree. That's not the way to do it.
probably one other thing, kind of staying on that same theme, it's like what's gone wrong is men will, I guess we'll call it overshare. It sounds like a goofy cliche, but fair enough.
Hmm.
Men will overshare. They'll be a little too open. We're told don't suppress your emotions. No, we're controlling ourselves. There's a difference. Thank you.
Yep. Yep.
The other part of that, though, is I'm going to be in control of what I do, and I'm going to do what I do for me. And so I really want to get on this. This will be something I'm going to really work on over the next few weeks. I'm going to make some longer form stuff for YouTube. Um, I'm 52 years old, and I've never totally lost my masculine frame in this sense. If you don't know what that phrase, I know you do, but
I
people
do. Yeah.
watching, if you don't know what that means, masculine frame is just everything we're talking about. Remember who you are. Um, I'm the protector. I'm the provider. I need to take care of myself so that I can take care of other
Take care of
people.
others. Yep.
And
Why we're doing
I
it.
think,
Yep.
yeah, I think it's very common. I'm not unique in this. That in my late 20s, I went and had a good time and did some crazy things, and I raced motorcycles, and I climbed towers, and I was a Marine, and blah blah, whatever. And I hit this point mid to late 20s, and I settled down, and I started. And I was in art school, left off that, went and got a regular job, some good money, and from, let's just say, my 30s for the most part, and then I started to wake up in my early 40s. I was sacrificing goals and ambitions for other people.
Yep.
Okay. And you wake up somewhere in your 40s and nobody cares. Start to curse. I don't know if we should do that here.
No, you can curse
Like,
all you want, man. My tagline is get your shit together. You can say whatever you want.
man, and I have some great kids. Like I said, my ex-wife's not horrible. And I'm even talking about the family. There's other people involved, people I work
Hmm.
for, the church I went to at the time. And you just wake up somewhere in your early 40s and you're like, motherfucker,
Hmm.
I have sacrificed so much for other people. And you
Yep.
realize you let goals and ambitions and larger, longer term things go for other people for the right reasons. I'm being the sheepdog.
Yep.
I'm being the warrior. I'm doing this for
Yep.
other people. And then nobody
That's our
cares,
role. That's our role.
you know? Yeah. And so I think my grandfather wouldn't have done that, to be honest. My grandfather was going to do what my grandfather was going to do. He had 10 kids.
Yep.
He stayed married his whole life. He produced, everybody was wonderful, and all his kids are very successful, and so on and so on. But he would have never said, oh, I'm not going to do my original plan because I have this to take care of. And through that slow degrading of the mass frame in my lifetime, nobody told me, hey, don't follow through with your original plans. Nobody said, don't do this. I just looked up, I'll probably be a better husband and father if I just go get a corporate gig, which I'm still in, but I'm not cut
Hmm.
out for.
Hmm.
And, it is what it is. So that's really what I want to get on. What I want to get on in the future, in the very near future, something along those lines of saying, hey, traditional masculinity would be take care of yourself first so that I can take care of those around me.
Yeah.
And we've really lost that in this sense of an over an overdone sense of sacrifice so that I can be a good man. No, no, no. The good man's going to take care of himself so that he's strong for everybody else around him.
Yes, there's two
That makes
pieces
sense.
to that. I mean, it's this the old adage of put on your own air mask first before you go to help anybody else. I also think about Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Habit 7 is sharpen the saw. You got to take the time to make yourself better and stronger. And that's another thing that, I'm always pushing. Hey, making yourself better helps everybody. We as men are leaders. There is no delineation between manhood and leadership. No matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, if you're a man, you're a leader. That's it. Embrace that role, whether you're at work, whether you're in your relationship, no matter what. And that's going to require you to be your best. You've got to be your strongest, your sharpest, your smartest, your fittest, your all of those things. The better you are, the better leader you can be, the better father you can be, the better husband you can be. You drain your own gas tank, you're no good to anybody. And I think that this comes back to what we were talking about. If you lose that frame and lose your core, lose your who you are, lose what you are, then you're there's nothing left. I mean, you run out of gas, like I said, and as these masculine pieces of you get chipped away by society, by maybe the relationship you're in, maybe the job situation that you're in, um, you're just like a ground down nub, and you're left. You're no good for anybody at that. Yeah, I agree with you that's not the way it was done, and it's not the way it should be being done. You keep yourself strong first for them. I specifically say it in my book. It isn't us or them, it's us for them. That's what it is to be a man. A good man is a savage
Yeah.
servant, stands in
Yeah.
the gap, takes on the bad guys, and comes home and rolls around with his kids. You got to be able to do both, and that's going to require you
Yep.
to make sure that you are your very best. And shit, as a role model, the kids are going to be watching what you're doing anyway. Your neighbors watch what you do. Your wife watches what you do. Everybody does. The stronger you are, the stronger they'll be. That's how that works.
I That's the hardest thing to get across to people in the modern era, men and women both,
Yep.
is if I say, don't come home after work and vent all of your concerns and complaints on your old lady.
Yeah.
I just offended somebody there. Thank you.
Yeah, that's all right, man.
You can talk. Obviously, she can be your friend up to a
Yep.
point. But if you're going to make her a buddy, if you're going to make her a close confidant that I spill out every little emotion, you're weakening yourself in her eyes. And that's really hard to explain to people, because we're not
Mhm.
saying be cold as ice. We're not saying be
Nope.
some stoic statue of immobility. But you have to find a balance somewhere in there of,
Yep.
I'm going to maintain my frame of, I'm the leader of this relationship, I'm the leader of this family, and so on. And I say we are the older generation, but especially my dad and my grandfather's generations, they just got that by example. It's not as if somebody sat them down and said, this is how you conduct yourself around women.
They saw it.
It's
They didn't
just,
have to hear it.
you know what?
They saw it.
Yeah. A good thumbnail, or a good rule of thumb rather, way to think of it is, we joke around about it now, but walk it off. Walk it off.
Rub some dirt on
Simple
it.
as that. I told my kid,
Yep.
walk it off. You're right.
Yeah.
And so generations past, my generation, generations past, were told to walk it off. When my now 20-year-old son, there's a couple different instances I can remember. He fell down. It looked bad. The women around him freaked out. And I said, this is in front of a crowd of people, too much to explain. Yeah. But I said, get up. And the women were like, oh my God.
Yeah,
and they just looked at me like I was the devil. You know what my son did? My barely 3-year-old son, he stood up and he looked at me. He was mad. He looked at me, and he brushed himself off. He didn't cry, got up and walked on. He kept on playing. Guess what?
There you go.
He didn't need to cry. He was fine. He brushed himself. He went. All the women were going to baby him.
And I think that's okay.
To this day, think I'm the devil.
Well, and you know what, Ray, dude, that's I think that's a great. Those are the two sides, right? Those are the two sides. There's the, that caring, warm, soft place to land. That's what moms should be, right? They should. And then dads are about repercussions, long-term delayed gratification, about go ahead and fail and see how much it hurts, and you'll realize it doesn't hurt that bad. So now you're not as afraid to fail. Deep end of the pool, right? You need them both, and I think that transition starts to happen as they get older, and they need more and more of that dad influence and less of the mom if they're going to be successful, especially as men. And yeah, both are important. I hope nobody's ever going to get that. There's no way I'm going to talk my way out of this, but no matter what I say, dude, and you've probably experienced this, if I'm pro masculinity, which I very much am, I'm constantly getting barraged with, well, then you must hate women. And I just don't see it that way at all. Like I said, it's us for them, not us or them. And I just can't stand that, dude. It's like the worst insult that just because we're trying to support men and make them better for women, for their kids, for the world, somehow I'm anti-woman. And I'm not. I don't think that way at all. It doesn't even cross my mind. But I think it is in some way. And I mean, as you talk about that, I just thought about you telling that story with your son, and the women think you're the devil. It's just a different way to think. There is no right or wrong in that situation. You know what I mean? I catch that all the time that,
And
you
it's a
must be
mother's,
anti-women. Go ahead.
yeah. And it's the mother's nature to, like you said, it's the
Yep.
mother's nature to want to step in and help.
Yep.
And perhaps that had happened in my grandfather's generation. My grandfather would have still gotten a dirty look from some of the women,
Probably.
but it wouldn't have been that big of a deal because the mother's nurturing nature was not being fueled by a narrative in the zeitgeist at the time to say masculine is bad. Once you put that narrative on top of the feminine nature to want to nurture, that just confirms to her that guy's bad.
Yep.
He's an
And I mean,
asshole.
and I was in that situation 100 times as a high school teacher, man. I taught English. So every English department I was in was all women. I was the only guy. And so I wasn't nurturing, warm, caring. That's not how I taught. They were high school kids. I taught like a dad. I taught like a football coach. And so that made me evil. That made me wrong. That made me a bad teacher in their eyes, right? But that wasn't true. My kids did great, and everybody needs a different kind of style. But yeah, that just blows my mind, man. And I think really what it does is it further colors. This is really going to get me in trouble, but I don't give a shit. Is the idea of the current third wave of feminism, which is it's a zero sum game. I mean, I think up to the early 90s, feminism was a pretty good thing. I mean, it was breaking through some glass ceilings and making it so everybody had equal opportunities, which how do you not agree with that? But after that, the only way for women to go any higher was to push down men. And so when women tell me that I must be anti-female because I'm pro-male, or they immediately take offense if I'm pro-male, which means they think I'm being pro-female, that tells me how their brains work. And that tells me that when they're thinking pro-female, really they're thinking anti-male. And that's really the zeitgeist you're talking about, that it's pervaded society and certainly education. It's a shame, man. And I'm glad there are guys like you trying to fix it, get the real ideas out there and do things that are going to help, man. Because ultimately that's what it is. I mean, you run into these guys that are, 30 years old and they, only been with one or two women or none and can't figure out why and don't really know how to act. And you find out, oh, they were raised by a single mom in a school district that was all women. They never got that male influence. So they don't really know how to act like a man. And that's what you and I are trying to fix. Hey, no, here's what you should have been taught. These are the things that are going to make your life happier. They're going to make a woman, they're going to make you more able to handle your role in a relationship or in life. I mean, I know I'm getting grandiose here, but I mean, that's where we should be going with this. I mean, I don't have any kind of bitterness. I don't have any kind of anti-female, agenda. That's not why I do this. I'm trying to help. And I assume that, you're coming from that same angle. I mean, we talked about that earlier, but I see there's something on your mind. Go ahead.
Well, it's the same thing. Well, I've only got it once or twice. I hear it a lot on other people's accounts, podcasts, and whatever. But when somebody runs out of a good argument
Mm-hmm.
On the things we're talking about, they'll just look at
Yeah.
the man and go, "Who hurt you?" And once you hear "who hurt you" to what you said, well, I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter. I'm just looking at obvious stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, who
Yeah.
hurt you? It's argument.
Yeah.
How about talking about what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Don't assume all kinds of negative things about me, because half the stuff I talk about hasn't happened to me personally,
Right.
right? But I don't
You
live in
saw
a
it happen.
cave and I
Right.
see what's going on. I told a thing about not being in the friend zone.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in the friend zone one damn time between my 8th grade and freshman year. And short version is I had too much ego. It was not warranted, you know. But man, that hurt my pride so much. Never going to do that again.
Right.
No, it's not going to do it. To the point though, I talk about all kinds of things. It's never happened to me, at least not as an adult. But people go, oh, who hurt? Why you bitter? Like you were talking about. It's like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I don't live in a cave. I can look around me and see all the things going on. It has
Right.
nothing to do with any personal feelings. I'm looking what's happening in society, what men are doing to themselves, what women are doing to themselves. Last night
Yep.
the followers that I have on TikTok is close to 18-19% female, which surprises me, by the way.
Hmm.
But I have a lot of positive feedback from women saying, yeah,
That's
men,
right.
quit acting like that. We don't want
Yeah,
that.
dude, and think about the phrase "who hurt you." That's just a massive assumption that everything you're doing is emotionally motivated, which that's not how we're wired, man. I mean, I'm motivated by logic. I'm motivated by seeing what's happening and trying to be a force for good, and that's how men work. So that whole comment of "who hurt you" tells me, well, you're thinking like a woman. Women are more emotionally driven. We're
Yep.
more logically driven. That's that. So, when I hear that, that's how I kind of tai chi that off of me. Like, no, man, that's your issue coming up. That's not mine. Uh, but it's still, it's a toughie. So tell me a good bartender story, man. Tell me a good situation where you watched what we're talking about flesh itself out. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but what do you got for me, man? I always wanted to be a bartender. I never was one.
Not at our age, you wouldn't want to do that. Well, maybe. Who knows? Um, I can't think of a real specific story. Okay, I will. So the one post I have that's over 1 million
Hmm.
on TikTok, I made some generalities, and some people took umbrage with the fact that I said if she says that she has a boyfriend or she has a fiance, 2 drinks later she gives you her number. Let me
Yep.
clarify that. If I'm talking to a woman, especially in my early 20s,
Hmm.
um, and she casually tells me, kind of like, yeah, I got a boyfriend. She's telling me she has a boyfriend. I get it. I
Out
get
of
it.
duty though, a
But
lot
of
of
course,
times.
this is TikTok.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's TikTok. It's 60 seconds. I'm trying to be brief. Help me out here,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so, what I learned as a bartender and a bouncer, I was actually bouncing that night, is that if they blurted it out too much, it's hard to explain out of context. But you start talking, they go, oh, and they throw it out there. What I learned, and this is a little anecdotal, I don't know that I can back this up, but my take on it is
Sure.
they're attracted, they like what's happening, the chemistry, and they go, boyfriend, right? And you go, oh, you like this, right?
Yep.
And in
Exactly.
that bar scene, fair enough,
It's
it's a
very
bar scene.
different than I'm not interested. It's very different than I'm not interested.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost a little too in my face. And
Yep.
so yeah, the one girl I was thinking of when I told that story on that larger post that I pinned there, um, I remember she's in Boston. It was a big wedding party comes in from Boston,
Hmm.
and there's a dozen of her. And why they're in California, I don't. So they come in, and she was like one of the last ones in. I'm checking IDs. I have a fiance. Good,
Sure.
whatever. She comes back literally 2 drinks later, and
Uh-huh.
just was hanging out by the door with the bouncers. There you
Uh-huh.
go.
Yep.
And so that turned into a thing. We won't get into that. But as a bartender story goes, I use that as clarification. Um, as men, especially young men, just be aware, because I try to talk before, is try to be aware of signs of interest, right? And so if she's just clearly like, no eye contact, and yeah, I got a friend, move away,
Different story.
But if
Yep.
she's like really
Move on.
engaged, yeah,
Yep.
and then she's like, oh, but I'm taken. It's just like trying a little too hard kind of thing. And there's a funnier story behind that that's not PG-13, but we'll skip that. But yeah, that would be funnier for another time, I guess.
Yeah, sure. That's
I'll tell you this. I tell you this. We went back to the place, and I'll keep it clean. So we're on the beach, and she has a skirt on, and you have to know where Huntington. We started in Newport. It's a long story. There's these steps. So here's the combed out beach, and there's these concrete steps, and we're sitting there kind of making out, doing whatever. And the big power truck, I forget the company name, we're sitting there at midnight, and this big truck comes up behind us, and a cajillion candlewatt whatever light shines on us, and
Sure.
it was just like the best time. If it were 2022, it'd probably be on a surveillance camera, make a viral video. The whole thing went down so nicely, which probably would have messed up her fiance. But there you go.
Yeah, dude, that's just human nature, man. I'm not going to tell you that that's men or women because I think that it happens both ways, and that's not the angle we're trying to take here. But Ray, I really appreciate you taking the
Yeah,
time.
that's
We just banged out an hour. I'm glad to know you. I will continue to support your posts. Once we get offline here, I'm going to text you, get your address, send you a swag package, send you some books, t-shirt. What you how tall are you?
6 foot.
Okay, so you probably want to rock a large. And looking how your shoulders fit there, you probably want a large size large t-shirt.
Typically large, yeah.
Yeah, send you a large, send you some books, send you some swag. Yeah, let's continue doing the good work, man. We're trying to help men be better at being men. Watch out for the traps. Watch out for the different things that are going to try to trip you up and try to make the world a better place.